I have to admit, I'm a little hesitant about this one. I saw this one coming, and as I said, I watched a bunch of these over the snow week we had recently, and when you set a goal for yourself, when you set a task for yourself like this, when you say, I'm going to review all of the Abbott and Costello movies, you do so with the knowledge that when you're reviewing a catalog as extensive and with as many entries in it, that you're gonna hit the duds eventually. It's the law of averages. You say you're gonna review all of the James Bond films. Not all the James Bond films are good. You know, all the Disney movies. Not all the Disney movies are good. You know, basically anything with that extensive of a catalog, you're gonna hit the ones that just don't work as well. And I know that as we get kind of closer and closer to the end of their film careers, I know some of those last couple films are going to be real hard to get through because, you know, but we'll get to that later. But rewatching Ride 'em Cowboy again and rewatching it with the purpose of reviewing it for enjoyment, but also knowing that I was going to come and talk about it, I had to face something that I kind of already knew, but I've had it confirmed for me, and that is, I think, of their early work, the first stage of their career, I think this is the worst of those movies. I really do. I think it is just not good. There's not a lot in it to really say, hey, let's go watch that one again. There are a lot of problems with it, and I think we got to talk about that and acknowledge that. And it's always, I don't know, at least for me, you feel like you're trying to walk a narrow line when you say we're going to talk about something that doesn't work in a genre that you really love. Because I feel like with fandom, and especially thanks to, you know, the internet, you know, biting the hand that feeds me a little bit, you feel like there's two kinds of fans. There's the sycophantic, the ones that no matter what it does are going to drop to their knees and just kiss its ass. You see this a lot in sports. Or there are the butthurt ones. I don't like The Last Jedi because Luke Skywalker wasn't a badass. You know, that kind of thing. And so you're trying to walk the line between giving an honest, objective look and, you know, not being nitpicky because things didn't work out quite the way you want them. It's a fine line, and I think a lot of people have trouble walking it. I know I do at times. So I'm really going to try to talk about this film objectively and why it doesn't work in comparison to a lot of their other films. And I think one of the things we're going to discover is the reason this one doesn't work is it ignores a lot of the lessons that we had learned from previous installments, which in a way you can understand. This was actually scheduled to be the third Abbott and Costello movie. So it was supposed to go Buck Privates, Oh Charlie, which would become Hold That Ghost, and then this one. However, this one, kind of like Hold That Ghost did, got shelved and pushed back in favor of In the Navy and Keep 'em Flying. So the script was there before any of these other films had really come out, been hits, and they could see what worked and what didn't. I mentioned this a bit with the Keep 'em Flying review. So they didn't really have the benefit of hindsight with it that I think we'll see in later installments of things that worked and they went back to that formula. And again, with these B pictures, they didn't waste a lot of time with rewrites. You know, this is their, fifth movie or so? And, like, they're pounding these things out, 3-4 a year. So when it came time, let's film this next one, it wasn't, let's go back and retool the script a little bit. It was, the script's ready, get to shooting. And like I say, they didn't take the time to really go back and say this worked and this didn't. And I think that's going to be the primary issue. So, what is the story? Well, that's part of the problem, is what is the story. Let's talk about what the scenario is. So the scenario this time around is Bud and Lou in a Western, essentially. You know, which, that sounds great. Again, one of the great things about these vaudeville comedians is the ability to just kind of drop them into all of these different settings and all these different genres of films and let them just kind of run rapid in it. So putting them in a cowboy picture, which cowboy pictures were kind of at their high point during this era, I mean, that's a natural thing. Get Bud and Lou in a cowboy picture. So that's the general plot, is Abbott and Costello go to work at a dude ranch. But right away we have a problem. So instead of dropping Bud and Lou in like a period Western, like they would do later with films like The Wistful Widow of Wagon Gap, they send them to what was at the time a more modern version of the cowboy, the working dude ranch. Why they went that route with it, I don't know, because I think if they had made the decision we're going to put them like in an actual Western and let them run amok, I think that would have solved a lot of the plot problems that this movie is going to run into. So right away we have an issue with it, in my opinion. Another issue is there's just not a lot for the boys to do in this, which again, you'd think putting them in a Western, plenty of opportunities for them to cause trouble. And you also understand the general formula of these things is just find an excuse to get them from one routine to the next. And it just doesn't work that way. There's not a lot they can do here, and there's not a lot that they do. We don't even really see a lot of their classic routines. You see things like the cow's udder, which is not so much a routine as it is just a quick passage of dialogue. You know, milk the cow, put the bucket under the cow's udder. The cow's udder what? You know, which is an Abbott and Costello trademark of Lou misunderstanding one word for another. But again, that's not a full routine. It's just kind of, again, a couple lines of dialogue. The only one of their routines that's actually in this movie is a vaudeville routine. I think it's called the Indian Chief. So pardon me for the not politically correct terminology that I'm going to be using during this review. And it's a thing where the comedian, and I say that because this is not an Abbott and Costello original routine, to my knowledge. The comedian goes to a mental hospital saying he's seeing Indians everywhere, and of course he thinks that the doctor has kind of the really racist, you know, Indian braids on, and he's seeing everybody in Indian hairdos and feathers, and he's trying to relax, but Indians and cavalrymen keep running in and shooting up the place, you know. And the joke in a live theater is supposed to be that, you know, just how, you know, the escalation of this guy's belief that all these things are there and trying to kill him. Of course, nobody believes him. First of all, it's not a very good routine. It's just not. And secondly, the way they do it in this film is, you know, taking a key from In the Navy, they do it as a dream sequence. So there's nothing at stake. You don't think that Lou is really crazy or anything like that. You just think he's having a dream. So, and they also intercut it with scenes of him like in bed tossing and turning, which ruins the flow. So again, that's like their only real routines in these. The other major problem, and I've mentioned this with Keep 'em Flying, but it's back, is that we have fallen backwards into the bad habit of Abbott and Costello being bit players in their own movie. I mentioned a second ago what the scenario of the film was. You know, Abbott and Costello on a dude ranch. But that's not the plot. Here's the plot. See if you can follow this. So our plot follows Bronco Bob Mitchell, and I have no idea what his actual job is. I assume he's an author, because he got famous by writing a series of adventure stories, Western adventure stories, supposedly written in the first person as if he actually did it. So these books have been marketed as if he is actually, like they're autobiographical, as opposed to fiction. On top of this, he has become a huge singing celebrity, because of course he is, because everybody in these fucking movies has to sing. So this author goes out and does singing engagements at rodeos and everything. Well, one of his critics is determined to prove that Bronco Bob Mitchell is not a real cowboy. So Bronco Bob falls in with a lovely lady from a dude ranch who is a cowgirl, and he goes back to her ranch to learn to be an actual cowboy for fear that this guy is going to expose him. Add on to that, later, of course, he's going to compete in some rodeo. Why do they call rodeos rodeos? Is that the right pronunciation? That's why I think this movie is obviously California people talking about southern things. I've never heard anyone else call it a rodeo. Anywho, but Bronco Bob is now going to compete in the rodeo on the Lazy S's side, but he makes a bet against them, and people from another ranch come and kidnap the great writer from their team, and Bob has to go save him. It's so fucking all over the place, and you see several of the problems. Number one, it's convoluted as fuck. At least with Keep 'Em Flying's plot, at least it made some kind of sense for the character. He was a hotshot pilot who was a dick and had to learn, to be a team player, even though he really didn't learn that lesson. But you see where it's going. This plot just makes no fucking sense, even in the realm of suspend your disbelief. Right? I mean, first of all, did they market these books as true life? Is that what they did? I mean, is that... If they didn't, if they were marketed as fiction stories, and everybody seems to acknowledge that they're adventure stories, then why does it matter if this guy actually is a cowboy? I don't think anyone ever demanded that the author actually experience the things that they're writing about. I mean, did Stephen King actually, work in a ski lodge and go crazy and kill his family? I don't think so, but I mean... Apparently, in this world's logic, you have to have actually done the things that you write about, especially if you're writing books in the first person. I'm reading a series of books now by an author about a woman who solves mysteries, and they're written in the first person. So do I have to be mad that the author actually didn't solve those mysteries? Furthermore, is it a thing now that authors have to sing and have to make, variety show appearances? I don't recall that ever happening. I don't recall, again, Stephen King ever coming out and crooning a tune before doing whatever. So the story just makes no bloody sense. And you can see the other problem with it, and that is, you notice as I was laying out that rather convoluted plot, you notice I never once said Bud and Lou did this. Now, Bud and Lou, of course, have their own plot, which is shunted to the side. And, of course, it's probably one of the most offensive plots because this was the 1940s and, racial sensitivity was not a thing. So in Bud and Lou's plot, Lou mistakenly shoots an arrow through, I'm going to use the terminology, you'll have to pardon me, no offense intended, through an Indian squaw's teepee, and by the laws of that tribe, anyone who shoots the arrow through the heart on a squaw's teepee has to marry her. So now these Indians are chasing Bud and Lou around, trying to get Lou to marry this Indian princess, and of course, she's dumpy and ugly, and, of course, not to be rude here, but it's not like Lou Costello was a huge catch. Just putting that out there. No offense, Lou. Just being honest. I'm not even going to touch on the racism because, I don't think I really need to. Like I said, it's the 1940s and they're doing a cowboy picture. You can probably guess how well the race issues are handled in this picture. The only thing I will say on that front is at least they kind of lean into the fact that the Native Americans are putting one over on, the the white man, and knowing that they're suckers and are playing into the stereotype in order to sell them things. So at least it shows them as being more savvy, and maybe savvy is not the right word, sorry, more clever than they're being given credit for. But that is really stretching it. Again, I don't blame this film specifically. It was the mindset of the time. Like I said, go watch a John Wayne movie sometime. But their plot is minimal, and it's all them kind of goofing around with these Indians who are trying to scare them and do various things, while the real plot is going on, and the real plot is freaking stupid. And not stupid in a good way. So yeah, there's just, upon reflection, and I think I always kind of knew this, because it's whenever I watch Abbott and Costello movies, it's never one of, ooh, let's watch Ride 'em Cowboy. I think this one there's too much working against it. Anything good about this movie? Well, two things. There's two things worth noting in this film. One second, I just realized how far back to it. There we go, that's a little better. Sorry. So there's two noteworthy things. Now, one of the elements about Bud and Lou movies that I've kind of railed against since I've started this is the end of the movie climactic chase scene. I always said that I'm not a fan of those. And while that is still true, I do have to say this is probably the best one, or one of the best ones of that. So in this one, of course, Bud and Lou have rescued our real hero and are trying to get him to the rodeo. So they're driving around this jalopy all around the West while this tribe of Indians chase after them. So it's this huge chase scene. And the reason I say it's the best is because it's kind of a testament to the stunt drivers and the stunt workers of those old movies and everything they did. And did practically. I've mentioned the practical effects in the past, but I think this one deserves a little extra mention. Some of the stunts they did on this, and you realize that those were actual people. There's a scene where the car drives through a house and breaks through the other end, pushing a bed with somebody sleeping in it in front of it. And they're showing it, and there's actually some dude asleep in this bed, waking up and rolling as this car is speeding down the track. So you somebody actually had to rig all that up, and some stunt guy had to get in that bed. I mean, that's pretty impressive. There's another scene where they drive into a train tunnel and then come backing out with the train, chasing them coming the right way. So some stunt driver had to get in this car on this track and actually, now obviously they probably rigged it up so that, it was on a wagon or something in front of it, but regardless, that's a practical stunt with a locomotive. That's pretty impressive. So I got to give the film and the director and all the stunt people a lot of credit for that. So I will say that chase scene, while I'm not a fan of the chase scenes in these movies, that is one that I actually think is very impressive. The other thing noteworthy about this film is it is the film debut of Ella Fitzgerald, the great singer Ella Fitzgerald. She's in this and sings a couple songs. She actually apparently had a longer song at one point, but it was cut for time. But yeah, so it has that trivia of being the first film for Ella Fitzgerald. And Ella Fitzgerald is awesome and had an amazing voice, and so yeah, so it's fun to see Ella Fitzgerald in this. But aside that, I'm sorry, this isn't a very good movie, and especially in comparison to some of the other ones we've seen and some of the ones we're going to see, it really does fall pretty far down the list of these films, in my opinion. It's not great. But again, as I've mentioned, two things to keep in mind. Number one, it's not as bad as it's going to get. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say that, and I'm not doing this series so I can kind of say, oh, let's look how far they fell. It's to say that as we get towards the end of their career, the routine is tired. They're older. They don't have the same zip and the same, pal, it's just time. That's nature taking over. And the one thing you can say is this still has that early Bud and Lou energy in it. The second thing to keep in mind is that, again, you do as many of these films as they did and you pump them out as fast as they did, you're going to hit some snags here and there, and that's fine. It's all about the recovery. And as we can see, as I mentioned a few reviews ago, is that if Hold That Ghost is the high water mark, and for me, in the early stages of Abbott and Costello films, it is. We've taken a slow downturn. We hit Keep 'Em Flying was a step down, and Ride 'Em Cowboy is a really low step down. And we're going to see now they're going to start to come up, and the quality is going to start coming back. I think a little bit more time is going to be paid with the scripts, and I think we're going to start to learn a little bit more from what works in the previous films and start applying those to future films. So, yes, Ride 'Em Cowboy doesn't work and doesn't hold up in retrospect, but they're going to make a quick turnaround. That's the other great thing. They made a lot of these movies, so one of them doesn't work, turn it right around and start with the next one. And they did. Only with the next film we're going to take a look at, we're going to see another first for Abbott and Costello. Almost all of the recognized Abbott and Costello canon was done under the Universal Studios umbrella. But through business deals that we'll talk about later, they did break off at least once a year to go do a film for MGM. So a couple of these movies are actually MGM films, which brought with it a lot more money and a lot more prestige. And what we're going to take a look at next time is what happens when a different set of writers, a different director, and a different studio get behind the Abbott and Costello juggernaut when we take a look at their first film for MGM, Rio Rita. So thank you for joining me. Hope you're enjoying these. I'm having a great time revisiting these films, even when they're not as great. And I look forward to talking about Rio Rita. So until next time, as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.